how important do you think is the uniqueness of your setup to the success of a show?
To be honest, in the beginning, I thought that's the most important. So when we started the change officer, I remember that we finished the episode and I was like, no, the background, like the shells, didn't look that appealing. It looks like, amateurs. It looks too simple. Light is not good. The position is not good. The focus is not good. The quality of the image is not good. The resolution is not good. I was looking at everything other than myself and other than my episode. So literally I was trying to find the solution for growth in everything and anything other than the content and what I was talking to my guests. Clips are not good. We're not distributing well. We're not promoting well. My copywriting in my post was not well. And then they realized that just avoiding to face the truth or the core, the hardest thing to actually impact, which is the content that you're recording.
Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Hope It Helps. My guest on the show today is Mr. Vuk Zlatarov. Vuk, welcome to the show.
Good to have you here.
Thank you. Did I pronounce it right?
No, you pronounced it right, but I'm so used to be on the other side. So I said, good to have you. I'm happy to be here, man.
Thank you so much for your time, man. I really appreciate it. So, Vuk, you've been a guest that I've been wanting to have on the show for a very long time, for many, many reasons. Guys, the people who don't know, if you're in the podcasting world, I don't think Vuk needs an introduction, but just in case, Vuk is the co-founder and CEO of Poddster and now Podyx, right? Is that how you say it?
Yeah.
Podyx, yeah. They are I've used their studios myself, and they are hands down the best studios that I've, had the pleasure of recording in for not just myself, but for my clients as well. So I'm really excited to have you on the show today, man. There's so many questions I want to get into, so many different areas. But before we get into everything, my man, why don't you give all of us a little bit of background about yourself, and we'll take it from there.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's funny listening to this introduction now. Only maybe 2.5 years after getting into this whole podcasting space, and you saying that I don't need the introduction, and I still feel like I always have to introduce myself because like it's been actually just 2 years since we started this whole Poddster life, and then that evolved in so many different lines and verticals of work now. Briefly, my background is I born and raised in Serbia, studied over there, used to professionally row, thought I'm gonna end up in the States and study over there, and then had an accident, had to stop the whole sports professional career.
That sucks, man. I'm sorry.
Well, look, I mean, it's funny how things happen in life. It doesn't suck actually, because death pointed me towards something else. I enrolled to a local Serbian university, met a bunch of great people, and then together with them started my first business in Dubai that led me to become, who I am today. So you never know, these things in life at the point when they happen, you might think it's the worst thing that happened to you, but actually on the hindsight, there is always a silver lining. So and then in 2014, after graduating from the university, a friend of mine was like, "Hey man, I'm heading to Dubai. I'm gonna set up a business over there. You wanna come with me?" And I was like, "Yeah, why not? I don't have anything else, smarter to do." I mean, there is obviously a longer story behind, but that's really the essence. We came here. We set up a software development company. So it was the usual, service providing consulting agency. We were building software of any kind for startups, corporates, any aspiring founder. We would offer them help, and I've been doing that really for almost 10 years. It evolved over years in many different shapes, as an agency, as a consultancy, as a venture building studio eventually. But at the very end, we ended up using that company mostly to build software for ourselves and other businesses that we were starting. And then around 2020, 2021, similarly, when you started your podcast, me and Ivan, who is the co-founder of Poddster, we started the Change Officer podcast. To be honest, in 2020, we all desperately need leads for our business. We started it to meet people that we could technically sell our services too. At the time, there was not really a lot of shows, as you remember.
Yeah.
So it was kind of, greenfield, and it took off. I met some incredible people. To be honest, soon after recording first 10 episodes, I forgot about the whole concept of business development and sales, and I was really using podcasts to build my ideal network. If you think about what would be your ideal network that you would like to surround yourself with, and you describe those individuals. Basically, I did that, and then I started outreaching to them. So instead of inviting them for lunch or dinner, that probably most of them would refuse, right? Because who am I to, for them to go have lunch with me? Luckily for me, most of them accepted my invite for a podcast. So that went well, and then obviously that introduced me to the whole space. We recognized the opportunity, and we started Poddster initially as an agency. That would initial idea was more like we would provide you a turnkey production service. We'll come to your office and produce a whole show for you.
So was it, sorry to interrupt, but so was at the time before it transitioned to what it was it you would come to like my office and build a studio in my office, or it would be just the production side, like the cameras, the equipment, the lighting?
Yeah, we wouldn't build the studio, but we would set up the recording equipment, obviously. Yeah. To be honest, our initial assumption was nobody wants to come to the studio. If we can come to your door and record at your office, why would you come to the studio? Right?
Interesting.
The studio was never, especially coming from software background. If someone told me in 2019 that we would be running now a brick and mortar business, basically, I would be like, "Come on, guys, we are not in 1990s." I would never assume we're going to do that. And then 6 months in, we signed a lot of contracts. It went well, but it started to look again like an agency that I didn't really want to build. The idea was never to build another agency because I was kind of tired of that whole business model. That comes with a lot of, downsides, a few upsides, but mostly downsides for scaling. So when it started looking like another agency, I was looking for a different way how we could build that business. And around that same time, first few clients started asking for the studio. And initially we were like, why would you need a studio? We'll come to your office. There's no point of you coming to the studio. But it turned out that there is a lot of convenience for them to come to the studio, walk in, walk out, they're done, instead of us, hijacking their office for half a day or full day. So he said, look, I have my studio, similar like you have yours now. If you want, you can rent that studio. But it's the same setup. Why would you use the same setup? Doesn't make any sense. They're like, we don't mind. So the first customer came in, walk out, and we made our first 500 dirhams. I was like, like if you can do this every day, whole day, there might be a business here.
Absolutely.
And if you standardize it and introduce, SOPs and the processes, you can actually be in control of the service that you're providing, and in a way, be in charge of customer satisfaction or design customer satisfaction. Whereas when you're providing custom solutions every time, there is always something that can go wrong. And at the end, in that sort of agency setup, service providing setup, it's very difficult to be in the control of the output and the outcome of the service that you're going to provide. And then we looked at studios, and it seemed like we can actually get on top of that and guarantee the output. It's going to be a controlled environment, and in 99.9% of cases, we will be on top of what we deliver. And that excited me. And I thought, if we can do this on scale, we might have a business here that can be quite, fun, enjoyable to work in, and finally you'll have happy customers most of the time,
For sure, yeah.
In agency service providing business is usually not the case. You either get
Very true.
Okay or you get blamed. Like very, very rarely do you get like, oh, we love what you do,
Very
like
true.
It's amazing.
Very true.
And that's how Poddster started. And then, from that one studio, we went in a few months from, 2 bookings to 200 bookings. And then we built 2 more and 2 more and 2 more. And we built Singapore. And then the whole Poddster brand and culture was born. And we realized that actually, what we did here is we just scaled what we had with our podcast, which was a place where just, great people met. We used our podcast initially to meet great people. And we knew that, the success of Poddster lies only in people, in community. So we doubled down on that really. And now what we're really trying to do is just leverage that as much as possible and build studios which are gathering amazing people who are meeting other amazing people and that are just growing together. And it's now beautiful to see, hosts who are collaborating with other hosts, or friendships that were born in the studio, business opportunities that were created in the studio. And it became much larger than what we ever thought it's going to be.
So at the time when you guys launched Poddster, because you guys, I think from my perspective, were the first ones that I heard about in the market, and not just from like myself, but from a lot of other people. At the time, were there a lot of other studios or not really? Because now there's like a shitload of them.
Yeah. When we started, that was end of 2021, beginning of 2022. There were technically 2 studios that would offer similar service. But they were really not doubling down or leveraging that position. One was just an audio studio as a part of a hotel, self-served. So there wasn't really that premium experience or the experience of you being taken care of. And there was another studio that was just as an additional revenue stream to an existing business. And again, it was not leveraged fully. I think what we brought to the market at the time was the turnkey service for customers and anyone who is, looking to produce a show for a relatively low entry point when it comes to the cost. I think we started with around 400 dirhams. You get the studio, you get the light, you get the operator, you get the file. So it was really a good deal. And you get that turnkey service. So we were first at the time. And then we reached now the stage where I say I think Dubai has the highest number of studios per capita in the world.
Really? Yeah, I'm
I
not
think
surprised.
there must be more than 50 studios now. And initially, obviously, after we started, we were like, oh, come on, like, we're not happy about it. But then you realize like it's actually it means we did something well. I mean, we started the trend, and now we reached the stage where there is a studio in Marrakesh now that literally completely copied the sets that we have in Dubai. So when you enter their website, you're not sure if those are our photos or they just created the same set. And it's becoming in a very strange and weird way flattering.
I get that. I think because this is what I was thinking. That's it's so interesting that they like copied your setups and whatever. But what I was thinking is like, okay, Poddster, from my perspective, you guys were the first in the market. And like you said, you provided a premium experience. Like no one I knew or heard of was doing it to the level of what you guys were. Like when I was looking at people launching podcasts and the quality of them and the beauty of the sets, like it's really like top-notch shit, man. So I was like, okay, now like you said, there's like 50. There's a lot more in the market now. So competition has gone up significantly. However, a couple of things. Number one, I think the brand you guys have created, and more important that the community and caliber of people that are recording with you, I don't think anyone else has that, number one. But number two, what I thought was very interesting, which brings me on to, we jumped a little ahead, but it's fine. So when I saw recently that you launched Podyx, I'm like, that's fucking genius. Why? Because okay, now there's a lot more studios, fine, that model now can be replicated in many places, but looks like you went back to your roots and brought the software mindset into this, and now there's going to be a massive demand for that software, and that really doesn't have... It's a lot, from my perspective, it's a lot more difficult to compete on something like that than it is in something that's like a brick and mortar, like a studio. Would that be fair to say?
Well, it is. I mean, look, obviously over the previous 2 years, we had different stages and our strategy evolved. We are expanding studio business. We set up in Singapore. We'll be setting up in a few other countries, but we always knew that it's going to be impossible to compete on the beauty and the design of your set or the quality of the camera that you have, right? You just simply can't. There is always going to be someone who is going to bring a better camera or a better DOP and have a better image. What you cannot compete on is the culture, how you make people feel, the general customer experience, and the relationship that you build with people. And this is why people keep coming back to the businesses that are providing this type of services.
Sure.
I always give example of barbershop. Why do you go back to the same barbershop? It's not only because of the haircut. It's because of that barber and how he makes you feel. Because every time you come back, you have the same level of communication, standardized service. If any of them would change every time you come in, you would feel anxious, like, who am I going to get this time when I walk in?
Very true.
I don't like them if they talk to me too much, but I don't like them to be silent either. So I like just a few questions here
balance.
and there.
Yeah.
And like, I have my barber and I'm going to, like, I'm seeing him like for 5 years. It's always the same balance. Few questions here and there. You want coffee, you want tea. I have my nap and I go back. Like, it doesn't really, at the end, even if he makes some mistake, I come back again because it's that experience.
Sure.
So this is what we were aware of at the very early days. Like, it's going to be the experience. So this is what we double down on. Now, second thing that we knew is that unless we automated the business as much as, technologically possible, with the prices that we want to go out to the market with, we won't be able to sustain our business, because the price that we are, positioning our services with on the market is not allowing us for massive overheads, which means you can't have a big team that is providing this type of service. You need high volume and you need streamlined operations. Okay. Now, when we started, there was nothing in the market, no tools that would allow us to do something like that. And with our software background, we decided to start building something ourselves, initially only for Poddster. But at the point when we realized that the industry, podcast studio as a service industry, is growing at a much faster pace that we as Poddster can keep up or catch up with, we decided that actually the best would be if we help other podcast studios reach this optimization, automation level where we are at with the software that we created. Yeah. And yes, it's giving you a much better edge. There is still a threat of possible, copycats and competition that will come in, but it's such a small market that it doesn't allow for 50 of them, right? Yeah. There can be a few that can compete, which is again something that it's healthy. I don't think that having no competition is not good as well. Sure. Competition really push you to move faster.
No, 100%. But I think that the pivot is very smart, because, like you said, the rate at that the studio industry is growing is very significant. But now your competition becomes someone that wants to collaborate with you as well, because of the software ad. So what was your mindset, I guess, when it came to Podyx? Because I took a quick look at it myself. It's almost like your studio dashboard for bookings, for production, for all that kind of stuff. So did it happen organically? You guys, as time went on and you evolved, you were building these systems for, like, okay, this is how we book, this is and you just decided to kind of compile all that together into something more streamlined that gives you. One of the big things that I really liked about the platform was the analytics side, because I think analytics, when it comes to podcasting, is very platform specific. Some have great analytics and some have terrible analytics. So I think that's also a big push to show, not only for the podcaster, the analytics of their show, but for you guys, when now you're going out and pitching, you can compile the analytics of the shows that you're producing, and now you have a much stronger value sell.
Yeah. Well, look, smarter people and more experienced entrepreneurs and business people than me said that if you can quantify like whatever you can quantify in business, try to quantify. The more numbers you have, the easier it will be for you to drive that business forward. And that's really the biggest truth out of all truths in business.
Yeah, facts.
If you can, count how many steps in the office you made every day, it can help you with making some decision in optimizing how you're going to run the business. So from the beginning, we started, quantifying everything we do in Poddster. And it was one big Excel sheet.
I'm sure it must have been a massive
and then you just keep adding and adding and adding and adding. And at some point, people in the company start asking themselves, why are we keeping track of all of this? But then when you look at your historical data for the previous 12 months, all of a sudden you see patterns that would be impossible to see if you didn't track those numbers. So sometimes tracking numbers, even before you have a clear idea of how you're going to use those numbers, helps, because when you realize you have historical data to analyze.
That's great advice.
So Podyx relies on numbers and analytics a lot, mostly for podcast studio performance. On top of that, we will be adding podcasts, etc. And this is the future of Podyx, where we can head to. But when we exposed to this industry, which is technically non-existent really, or was non-existent before 2020, podcast studios, there were a few around the world. Most of them were focused on IP creation and producing their own shows. There was not a lot of podcast studio that were providing that as a service. We had to learn things and create processes ourselves. There was nothing we can look at or analyze another business to build something. So the more we were getting into the business, the more we realized what are all different tools that you need to operate the business. From booking, we used to, rely on Calendly, to payments, to project management, to file sharing, to customer retention and feedback, to marketing. So you have all of these tools that mostly you're subscribed to, and you're paying, some of them you're paying high tickets, some of them are some small tickets. But what's common, not only for this industry, but for many industries, is that you end up in a place where you are subscribed to 10 different tools and softwares. You're paying full price, but you're using maybe 5 to 10% of their capabilities.
Very true.
Right. So we are paying, for example, HubSpot just for the emails. Whereas HubSpot is a monster, right?
Yeah. It's a beast.
We are paying Frame, which is feedback gathering collaboration for the videos. A few $100. We are using just one feature. And, this is when we realized, if we can build a software that will replace at least 50, 60, 70% of those features and keep everything under one umbrella and provide that streamlined experience both for the studio but also for customers, we're going to win. So Podyx is really focused on two things. One is how do you grow your revenue and boost your sales, and two is how do you streamline your operation. So how can we sell more as a podcast studio, and how can we optimize our expenses so that our net margin becomes higher. And we were only in the place to realize this opportunity because we got ourselves exposed deeply to that specific industry. So my learning after now being 10, 11 years in entrepreneurship is that unless you expose yourself to a certain industry very deeply and get involved to understand it fully, it's very difficult to create and come up with the ideas that can solve certain problems. You see very often people thinking about next idea, where it's very difficult to think of an idea if you're observing the industry from the surface. It really helps when you get deep inside.
100%.
If that makes sense.
No, that makes perfect sense, because the more you understand the industry, the more you understand the challenges that come from it, the more you think about the frustrations that are, or bottlenecks that are affecting your business and so on, and all of that creates the opportunity to think of that next idea. So no, I think that's great advice, and something that even speaking for myself, being in the podcast industry, it took time, to really learn all these things, even on the consulting, like not just on the podcast and production side, but on the consulting side, and realizing where are the struggles of clients, where's the education gap, what are they still, hesitant about. I wanted to just come back to the Change Officer podcast for a sec, because, and I love what you were saying at the beginning, because I've read, everything you were saying is exactly what I tell people. having a podcast is, and of course we're going to be biased, but fair enough. Okay, this has led to where we are now, so we have to be. Especially on the networking side, I think that's a side that people tend to neglect a lot, because now you have access. It's kind of like what you're saying, like, oh, if I want to sell something to someone, if I've invited you on my show, we've had a very good. First of all, if I'm inviting you on my show, what does that do as the person on the other side? That means I see you as someone of value. I'm giving you a platform to speak. And if I do a good job as a host of having a good conversation, then you're going to, even if we don't do business, you're going to leave with a good memory of myself in your mind. And that might open so many doors. I'm sure with your podcast, just like with mine, one good experience, that guy's like, oh, you should go check out Vuk's podcast, maybe go on that, whatever. So it adds so much credibility to like your brand. But a lot of people, I think, still, maybe not so much individuals, but businesses are still hesitant. So we did an event last week with Lemia and Adil and some other people, and we were talking about the gap in the market, that there's still an education gap for businesses to understand the value of podcasts. So from your podcasting experience, I guess, what would you say to that? And what's your perspective on podcasts more focused on for businesses?
Well, I mean, it's a big topic, important one, but it's quite simple. The benefit of hosting a show has, multiple different exponential benefits.
Absolutely,
for individual or for a business. If you think about relationships in general, one single relationship can change your life.
100%.
Right?
100%.
You never know, who is going to be that one single relationship. But if you expose yourself and continuously keep creating relationships, the chances for a life-changing one are higher, right? If you sit at home and don't meet anyone, the chances something is going to change are quite slim.
Yeah,
right.
True.
The more people you meet, the higher chances are that there will be a positive impact on your life or on your business. Now, the quality of those relationships is also important, and the quality of those people that you're meeting is quite important. So if you throw yourself in a random networking event or a random environment or a random conference, the chances are that you're going to meet random people are high, right?
Yes.
Now, what podcast is really allowing you to do is to think carefully of who would be those ideal relationships that could potentially change your life or a business, and then proactively outreach to them and design your network that is going to be, constructed from those relationships. So as an example, if, as in our case, you're running a software business, obviously people who can change trajectory of your business would be VPs of digital, CTOs, CIOs of, let's say that you were trying to approach bigger corporate clients. So if you have a podcast and you record 52 episodes and outreach to those specific individuals, and you end up a year with 52 new VPs of digital and CIOs and CTOs, the chances are that you're going to close business with some of them are very high. But this is just one benefit. There is an enormous benefit in brand awareness and the amount of content that you put out there. I think one overarching advice and the lesson learned is also, concluded from the relationships. When you meet someone and they tell you that they are in finance, right? Specifically focused on startups. They help startups run their books, let's say, and then give them advice. And we had a great conversation, right? If we don't talk to each other after that, after we met, I am most likely going to forget about what you do. And the next time someone asks me for, hey, do you have someone to recommend? I'm running a startup. I need someone who can advise me on my books and finances. The chances that I'm going to remember you are slim if we didn't see each other for 3 or 4 months, right? However, if you are creating content constantly and we're connected on Instagram and every week or two you pop up with, something on the topic, the chance that you're top of mind for me are very high. which then, gives you something about your general strategy of going out in the world with the business and your offering.
Sure.
You need to meet people, and you need to make sure you stay top of mind. You can meet people directly through podcasts. You can stay top of mind through podcasts because you continuously keep adding value to them and keep posting content. And there are a lot more. So I think, podcasts definitely can add tremendous value. Now, the challenge is that you have big businesses and big corporates that are struggling to commit to a podcast on the long run.
That's such a great point.
Which is probably the biggest challenge, because video podcasts are something that you need to commit on a slightly longer term in order to experience the true results. And given that most of leaders are short term with each of these businesses, most of the leaders are looking for short term gains, which are within a year or a fiscal year, or how is this adding to my P&L or my KPIs this year. So podcasts rarely do have such a strong impact on a short-term goals, which is making them a hard sell. Internally.
That's you hit the nail literally on the head. Because that, in the conversations I have with like clients, they always like, oh, when can we see like numbers, when can we do all this? And on the panel last week, we were talking about how exactly the point you said, podcasting is a long-term play. This is not a short-term thing. And I think that's one of the main struggles of selling it to people. Now, the benefits are there, but like you said, it does take a long time to recoup them and to get what you want out of a podcast. But one of the things that I don't think people realize when it comes to podcasting is I love how you describe the relationship side and thinking of it from that lens. The problem is the people that you're speaking to, or businesses that you're speaking to that want to launch podcasts, look at it from a pure marketing lens, and they're using very traditional marketing metrics to analyze the success of a show. So it's very view based. How many impressions did we get? How many listens did we get? Is that important? I always say yes, it is a factor for sure, but you don't necessarily need a very big audience to get a lot of value from your podcast. And people often neglect the relationships that you've built and the guests that you've had on the show as a result of it. So I don't know how we can start changing people's mindset when it comes to that, because that's an area, I guess, even for my business, it's been a struggle.
Yeah. I don't think we need to change the mindset. I think you need to help them align the strategy behind the podcast with their goals and KPIs. If you manage to align, there is a reason they're not going for it as much, because it's difficult to fit in a show with its long format and longevity into rapid phase campaigns that most of the businesses are going for. So I think it's on us to present and introduce the strategy that aligns with their KPIs, understand what are their KPIs, because if their KPI is brand awareness, they're simply not looking for a marathon running podcast that is going to give them result after a year. If their KPI are senior leaders as leads, let's run a show and let's invite top 20 voices in this industry on your show. Spot on. If you're a new business penetrating a new market, perfect, let's go for it. One new lead a week. There is undoubtedly is going to add value. But if you are a big brand that is looking to raise awareness about the new product launch, you're not going to launch a podcast, because if you launch a podcast, you need to take some time for that podcast to pick up. So you want to sponsor and advertise in other shows. So I don't think that there needs to be necessarily a mindset change. I think there needs to be a better job needs to be done in the alignment between the strategy between the strategy of a show and the strategy of a business.
I think that's actually really, really great advice, because I think maybe listening to you say that, I think one of the maybe misconceptions or mistakes maybe I was making is not thinking about it more from like the KPI perspective of what they're specifically trying to achieve. I'm very I always talk about the benefits of podcasts, and I'm sure you would too, because we've seen what it's done for us, but we also know that it took a long time, to get us to what we're doing right now. So when it coming back to Poddster, so you guys started off as almost like an agency, going to people and producing, in their spaces and so on. And then you transitioned into setting up, your studios. Now, the question I started to think about is, what did you notice that you thought you're like, okay, I think shifting it to this new model that you guys have now would be more efficient for us? Because I can imagine, because I know like the cost of setting up, like for example, the studios, each one, I don't know what it costs, but because I've set up my own, I can ballpark what it is. It is quite costly. So I think honestly, to be very honest, what you guys offer for the price you offer it at is insane. It's
almost doesn't make sense.
I know. I swear, like as a deal, it's ridiculous. I would be charging double, honestly. That would be me, because I'm getting so much for that. Like as a client, believe me, I'm very happy as a client, but as what I would say to someone who's in your position, have you guys thought about increasing the prices, or you're happy with this model and that's what you can keep people coming back? Because I would argue you've established yourself at a certain level that you could afford to do that.
Maybe. But
sorry guys if he does somehow.
we got asked that question a lot, and maybe we made the mistake at the beginning when we priced the service. We set up the market price. So when we started, we set up the market price. Any new studio that came into the market couldn't price it more. They could only go down, and now you can see studios cutting the price so much that it's one-way street for closing the studio, and it's just not what we want to do. Do we want to go up, or can we go up? I think we possibly can, but we don't want to. We have a great business. And the best part about that business are the people who are coming in. And the biggest opportunities for Poddster and for people who are coming in are coming on top of Poddster. So look at Poddster as a base.
Yeah.
It's a base that attracts a number of amazing people who are coming in there every day. And the true business opportunities are actually on top of it. So this is really how we feel about Poddster today. We could go and chase the numbers and try to increase prices, but at the same time we feel responsible towards a lot of people who showed us trust in the early days and recorded at Poddster. Really, I mean, this is not PR thing or me trying to. We're really thankful for the people who trusted us in the early days, because those people who recognized what we are offering early are the reason why we managed to build what we built. So it's kind of work both ways.
I get it. I get what you're saying. It sounds like yes, you could increase your prices. I think it'd be very easy to do, but I appreciate that you want to maintain the essence of what you guys built, and appreciate the people who were there at the beginning and continue, helping others, along this process.
The future of this business is not or the growth of this business is not in necessarily even building more studios or increasing prices. The future of this business is now, how do we help creators at this second stage? What happened over the previous 2 years is, because of businesses like Poddster now, the access to this type of production and the barrier to entry is a lot lower.
Yeah.
So most of average Dubai residents who are flirting with the idea of having their own podcast could try it out for a few thousand dirhams, which is equivalent to subscribe or buying yourself something or subscribing to a gym almost, like for 6 months.
Yeah.
Which resulted in a lot of shows being produced now.
Yes.
So we went from zero to at some base level where you have a lot of shows. Now, what needs to happen is the quality of those shows need to improve. So this is where the growth can happen. How do we help podcasters now and in general content creators grow and create results and eventually monetize their podcast? This is really where additional value can be created.
Yeah.
So studios are really just a starting point.
Yeah. So it sounds like you're trying to create the entire ecosystem. You know, you come, we have the space for you to record. We will then help you to grow your show, and then we will help you to monetize it. So it's kind of like an all-in-one
But that's where
comprehensive package, right?
we really how we would like people to feel about Poddster is, hey, I go to Poddster and I'm taken care of. Whether that's going to be done by Poddster or by ecosystem partners, we are the doors to the industry. You know, we're going to help you produce, but then we're going to make right introductions. We're going to advise you, consult you. You can join our academy. You can learn. You can join the community, Pod Club. It's just one-stop shop in a way for you to enter the industry and grow. And this is where I see the future, of Poddster, not necessarily in building 10 more studios in Dubai.
Yeah. That's actually really interesting. I think that business model makes a lot of sense. Being the one-stop shop is what we all kind of want. It's kind of the same thing the same approach you guys took with Podyx, which is taking all those different tools that everyone uses or we would need and compiling them into one thing. You make your life easier. The offering becomes much more attractable. So I love that that's the vision for it. And I think I don't see any reason why, that can't happen,
But it's at the end of the day, like in anything that you do, it's really about the execution.
Exactly.
I mean, it's taking step by step and executing and continuously providing value. If we manage to continuously provide value at every step of the way, we might end up at that next phase. But I think until then, it's really important that the community stays together, that we keep gathering people and sharing, and we'll be there.
100%. Like at the end of the day, the value does lie in the community, because that was there before, it'll be here now, and that's what will take you to that next stage. So I know with Poddster, the idea was to democratize podcast production and to make it, because a lot of people, one of the main reasons they don't start podcasts is the production side, the studio side, setting up all that. And you guys, as we were just saying, you have brought it at a very affordable rate, for 500 an hour to get the level of production and quality that I'm getting is fantastic. Now, I'm sure, as you said, and you mentioned this earlier in the conversation, that you were worried that because now there's a lot of podcasts, but there's because there's only a limited number of sets and studios, they all look the same. My head was in two places. So on one side, I'm like, as a podcaster, is that a benefit or a disadvantage? But then I was thinking, as a business for Poddster, no matter whose podcast it is, because of the sets, I know there's Poddster. So from a business, it's a benefit to the business. So the question that I was starting to think about, or I'm curious to hear your perspective on, is how important do you think is the uniqueness of your setup to the success of a show?
To be honest, in the beginning, I thought that's the most important thing. So when we started the change officer, I remember that we finished the episode and I was like, no, the background, like the shells, didn't look that appealing. It looks like, amateurs. It looks too simple. Light is not good. The position is not good. The focus is not good. The quality of the image is not good. The resolution is not good. I was looking at everything other than myself and other than my episode. So literally I was trying to find the solution for growth in everything and anything other than the content and what I was talking to my guests. Clips are not good. We're not distributing well. We're not promoting well. My copywriting in my post was not well. And then they realized that just avoiding to face the truth or the core, the hardest thing to actually impact, which is the content that you're recording. So when Poddster started, based on that thinking that I had, I thought, why would you use my own set?
Yeah.
Like, imagine you start a podcast studio here and people like rent your own set of your own show. You would think it doesn't make any sense.
Sure, yeah.
But then you realize people didn't care. And they were right. Because it's really about the content and what you're talking, right? And the essence of that, conversation. And then, of course, yes, at a later stage when you build up your name and you reach, a certain phase in the life of your show, you could look at, building your own set. And frankly, this is where probably Poddster is not a good fit for you anymore because, you evolved. You became like a mini business. So you can consider having your own studio. But then again, when you look at it, you realize how much work it is actually to upgrade the studio. You just experience just one of the things that can happen.
Exactly, yeah.
That you need to stress about while you're trying to get into a conversation with me. And then many people who even reach the stage of possibly setting up their own studio, they give up and they continue using something similar to Poddster because of the convenience.
100%.
So yeah, that's my the number one advice we give to anyone in Poddster now is just forget about anything. Just listen to your episode and focus on the content that you're recording, and ask yourself, would you listen to your podcast?
That's
Have you listened to your episodes?
Mine?
Do you listen to
Yeah,
your episodes?
always. Yeah,
Okay.
for sure. Because I'm the editor too, so I go back and
That's
listen
the
to
best.
you
That's
know?
the best and fastest way to learn.
100%.
You listen to your episode, then you're like, dude, you were literally you were asking that simple question for like 2 minutes. Like I lost you after 10 seconds, man. You need to focus. You know.
No, it's so interesting. That's so interesting that's that's the realization you came to, because in my experience, at least, I was the opposite. So my experience, I was just very, but look, now comparing when I listened to, actually earlier this year, I don't know why I was listening to like my early episodes, like episode like 1 to 10. And now we're at like 100 something. And I'm like, man, like I would listen to those episodes, back then, like the level of questions and just the whole vibe was not there. So my perspective was always focus on the content, do my best to have a good conversation, and that should lead to, success and building up the show. However, I reached a point before, I set up the studio and like this earlier this year is I neglected the other half of it, which was the quality of the production, the marketing, the distribution, all that. So it's interesting that you had an opposite experience to what I'm currently having or like going through myself. So it's just very interesting that like the two different, different approaches.
Look, you can survive without a great production and editing, but you cannot survive without great content, right?
Fair.
So I think
That's
that
true.
great
That's true.
editing and post production and distribution definitely go a long way.
Yeah.
And can amplify what you created in the episode. Example of building a gas station in the middle of the desert. I mean, that's the analogy, right? Like, who is going to come? You need to put it on the highway so someone can see it, and stop. But the core is to create great content.
Absolutely, yeah.
After you create the great content, you can think about other stuff. But without great content, there is no amount of editing and post-production that can help you get people to listen to your show, right?
100%. I love that, man. That's such a great analogy, and that's amazing advice to. Even to myself, that's very refreshing advice, because I think a lot of times we do get distracted by all the bells and whistles.
It's a path of least resistance, right?
Yeah, that's true.
You are avoiding to face the truth and the reality that, you didn't do well, for example, your guest didn't do well. It's your guest as well. Like, you need to think about that. Like, it's about whether guests are efficient in expressing themselves.
Yeah.
It's very difficult to listen to someone who needs 5 minutes to send a simple message, right?
Sure.
And your audience is going to lose it. Like, the time is really precious. Think about you consuming, shows. So it's really about guests, whether you select them the right way, whether you help them express themselves efficiently, and then whether you are efficient in sending across your thoughts and asking those questions.
No, 100%, man. And like you said, the guest part is just as important, but it's also, I tell people all the time, there's lots of, you as a guest, you can have the same guest on multiple podcasts. The reason people keep coming back to your show is the host. So the host has a massive responsibility to the success, to the success of a show. Think of Diary of a CEO, the guests that go on there go on a lot of other big podcasts. But I keep going back to him as a great example because I love this, like the way he interviews, the questions he asks. And he's actually a very great example because he does things in the space and I'm like, fuck, that's a great idea. I wish I thought of that. You know what I mean? But now, let's say I'm like, okay, Vuk, I want to build my own studio. And you said this earlier before we even started recording. You're like, because I thought at the time as well, it's the quality of the camera that is, very important. But you said, no, actually, it's the lighting that can, make or change a thing. Now, going through this whole experience of building, this studio, one of my friends, shout out, he has a film background. So we spent, I think, 10 hours in this room, moving the light 1 centimeter here, put this light, let's change these colors. So like it is a lot of work. But if you were going to give advice to someone and they wanted to set up a home studio, what advice would you give them? Because the cost is going to be there. Like I can tell you everything here, including this, probably over the last year, it's probably been maybe 30, 40,000 to get to get everything done. But for me, this is it's so worth it for me, and I will happily invest this and more because this is something for me I'll be doing for the rest of my life. So it's a little bit different.
Yeah, for someone who is just getting started and they're not making money out of this, it absolutely doesn't make any sense, right?
Yeah.
So anyone looking to see whether podcast is their thing, straight to the studio.
Yeah.
Doesn't have to be Poddster. Any studio, like use the studio. I mean, it doesn't make sense to invest this much and to realize after 2 episodes this is not for you.
True, very true.
For someone who is confident and they really wanna start and invest in the equipment. I mean, look, I'm not the one to give advice. I mean, I was in charge of and I led the whole build of Poddster, etc. But more experienced and smarter people than me set up the studios. I didn't even know what's aperture and shutter before we started.
Neither did I.
I think now I reached the stage where I'm actually like pretty good at it.
There you go.
And I just picked it up. In my view, it's the size of the room that helps. The more depth of field you have, the higher the quality of the image would be. So try to position the chairs so that you have this depth of field, so that you can have that blur. You use lenses that are allowing you to have that focus and that nice sharpness of the image, but light is the key. You can literally take your iPhone, especially these new ones that are like killers, and with a good light, and light is like, I don't want to underestimate it, it's an actual like science.
Absolutely.
Light is a science. With a good light and a decent camera, you're going to do wonders. Best investment that you can make, bring someone with experience.
There you go.
Because
100%,
you can spend hours. And then that good image does add to your credibility. If someone is experiencing you for the first time and your show for the first time, and they don't know who you are not an influencer, you're an average person, that whole impression that they get is going to be a combination of what you're saying, how does that sound, and how do you look, right? So if your sound is sharp, if your image is clear, and then if what you're saying is okay, at least they might give you a chance and listen to more content that you produce. So I always say, look, having this high quality of production just helps you and increases your chance of someone giving you a chance and listening to your content.
Very interesting.
But again, content will be the key.
Exactly, like you said.
But if you as you said, like if you're saying the smartest thing ever, but in the first 5 seconds it literally looks like you're recording yourself in a kitchen, probably they will be a bit confused.
It's the thing is, like we were talking earlier, it all matters. It all matters. But like you said, I think for people who are looking to start a podcast, the framework should be content first, then look at the production. And like you said, light is a science. Like the amount I've learned like doing all this has been mind blowing, and I only know 0.1% of the capabilities of cameras, of lights, but light was the biggest mindfuck to me. Like I couldn't believe how much it affects everything.
And it's beautiful.
It's
honestly,
insane.
I'm in love with at the stage where in my free time now, if I had some free time, I would actually do something like that.
You just
it's just
play.
Beautiful. Beautiful, like what you can achieve with life.
No, 100%, man. And so I know. So where do you see? I guess now, like you said, the studio market is growing a lot. Where do you see most studios, I guess, fail? Because I think in terms of production, like we were saying earlier, anyone can invest in having the top line of production. That's a very simple thing. Where do you see studios fail to like be successful at? What do you think it is?
I mean, there is now we had a chance to speak to studios globally, literally, like from the States to Canada and New Zealand. I think actually here in Dubai, we're doing really well when it comes to understanding the market and offering what market needs. I think many studios around the world are actually underestimating the power of what's called retail business, which is like B2C, like individuals, average people who are looking to start a show. Most of studios around the world are chasing next big shot and to do a production for someone who is going to create a successful show and then on the back of that monetize. So most of them are underserving this regular people and educating them to start a show. So that's one. What they're doing, what we think, or what's our assumption, most of them are not doing well. Here locally, I mean, there are things that you can see and there are things that we cannot see. I mean, what we can see is just the surface. And what we can hear is the feedback from the customers.
Sure.
From the surface, I think that they're not just from branding and marketing 101. I think that's most of them are missing. From the service, what we are hearing is that the customer service is not at the right level. But at the same time, who are we to say anything? I mean, I don't want to talk about or give it. There are so many things and factors that are influencing that we don't know, that it's very difficult to
like pinpoint
to pinpoint. I can tell you what we did. We focused on every part of the business. And I think that as a whole, in this industry, people are just not taking this as a serious business. Most of studios, as from what I see it as it's either a side hustle, passive income. So you have someone who saw that if they rent a studio in that piece of real estate, they're going to make more money than if they just rent it as an office. Or it's someone who saw, hey, let's just put 3 cameras in the room and an operator, and we're going to rent it for $100. Or you have a passionate videographer, photographer who is like, this is the trend, now let me do it. In each of these cases, it's not taken seriously as a business. What I mean by that is build a brand, do marketing well, do sales, do customer support and service, do the operation, do the follow-up. So like the whole 360 approach.
Yeah.
If you do that, people recognize it, people take you seriously, and people trust you.
Yeah.
What we do in the studio and what people trust us to do is very sensitive, right? They need to walk in with someone of importance. They need to spend 60 minutes recording with them. They don't want anything to go wrong. They want to feel safe, comfortable, secure. They want to be treated well. So all of these small elements are adding to it, and this is making it difficult for us to even pinpoint what's the key influencer on, call it, success of what we did so far. If you ask me what, I really wouldn't be able to tell you why. Maybe some of the things we're investing in, we don't have to necessarily. Maybe people don't pay attention to. But it's just difficult to say now. I think there is just a combination of a lot of different factors that can be applied for anything else that you do. Like no matter what you do, if you take care of every single point of what makes one business, most likely it's going to work.
Yeah, that's true. And I think the point you made about and this kind of moves me on to like my next question, as people seeing podcasts as a trend. Now, just as well as I do, I don't know what the statistic was, 90% of podcasts don't even make it past, the 3rd episode.
Yeah.
People, and I think nowadays there's so many people that want to do podcasts, but I was saying this on the panel the other day. I was like, especially when I meet clients, they're like, how do we want to start a podcast? I'm like, great. Why?
Yeah.
And literally, there's no answer to that question. They just, and I feel that is what's happening in the studio space as well. Either you have a passion for it and you're going to take it seriously and treat it as a business, or you're not. Like you said, just having a space with cameras and lights is not enough. It's just not going to do it. And like, I understand from your perspective why you said it's hard to pinpoint, what makes it successful, because even when if you take that example on like the studio, if you take it to a podcast, it's very hard to pinpoint what's making it successful. Yeah. Is it the person? Is it the marketing? Is it the branding? There's so many different things that, play into it. Now, looking at podcasts, as you know, in Saudi, across the region, it's grown massively. Now, sometimes I think about this and I'm like, I don't know if podcasts are a phase or is this a new medium that's going to be here for the long term? Like, because like you said, we were saying sometimes people get into it for the wrong reasons. It's fashionable, it's trendy, whatever. And Lemia, actually, shout out Lemia, she said this on the panel the other day. She's like, not everyone should start a podcast. She said, if you don't have a passion for something, you're not going to carry it through whatever topic it is in the long term. So I'm curious from your perspective, do you see it as just being a phase? Because for me, I'm going to be doing this for the rest of my life because I love speaking to people. This is my favorite thing to do. Yeah. So mine's a little bit different, but what do you think?
So shout out to Lemmy and Adel, but
shout out, guys.
But I'll have to respectfully disagree. I think that, for example, I never wanted to start a podcast.
Okay.
I was never passionate about podcast. I was quite nervous about the camera and my performance and whether I would be good at it. By just, coincidence, when we were starting a show, whereas I was pushing for my business development manager to be a host, but I'm not sure what really happened. He couldn't do it, so I had to step into that seat. Did my first episode, second, third, fourth, fifth. Fell in love, became passionate about it, and realized it's the best thing ever happened to me.
100%.
So, whereas I agree, it's not for everyone, 100%. I do support everyone in my environment to give it a shot. Sure. Because it might end up being something they fell in love with.
Sure.
If nothing else, it will provide you once a week a very genuine, cool, deep conversation with a new person. And at the end of the day, we are living now in these times where we are lacking proper conversations. That, if nothing else, is going to be 1 hour of great conversation a week. Yeah. Even if you don't publish that episode. So it depends how you look at podcasts, right? You can look at podcast as a medium that you want to grow and succeed at. You can look at podcast just as a conversation between two people that is documented that you can look at later on, even if you don't publish. And then it becomes much bigger than a podcast itself is a medium. So in that sense, I don't think podcasts are going anywhere. They're just going to evolve. The quality will improve. Yeah. The good ones will stay. The bad ones will, stop. But it's just as radio or TV, or it's not going anywhere. It's just going to evolve, become better and better. Production will improve. The research will improve. With all of these tools, we're going to become much more prepared for these conversations. But eventually, it's always going to be about two people in the room with lights just focused on each other and talking deeply about something that they're passionate about. So that's, I think, is the key.
That's the essence of it, right?
That is going to be, they're going to secure the longevity.
Yeah. I love what you said there, man, that, no matter what the reason is, I would advise anyone, just like start it, have some fun, check it out. And you mentioned such a good point there is you don't even have to publish it. And you mentioned this earlier in our conversation too about relationships, connections. Right now, I think podcasts are so big is because we're craving authentic, real conversations. That's why you see all the biggest guys in the world, Mark Zuckerbergs, the Mark Cubans, whatever. You don't see them doing TV interviews anymore. Podcasting is the new.
But you saw the U.S. elections now. You have
Trump on Joe Rogan.
Yeah, all shows. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So. And because we want, as people, we're trying to see the human. We want to see the human behind the title, and I think that's what makes podcasting so attractive. So, the way you're looking at it and the way you phrased it, I think, gives me more, confidence in if I look at it through that lens. That yes, it would. This is something that will stay for the long time. Just like you said, like TV and like radio. You mentioned earlier in our conversation that the processes that you guys put in place at Poddster are very important. And I actually read the article that you talked about systems, and that there's a difference between a lot of times one of the misconceptions that was refreshing to hear from you is that people put, if you have a process, you're not catering to people, and if you focus too much on people, then you can't have a process. But you talked about how the people need to be it needs to be human centric. The essence of how you build the process to help the people, not the other way around. So could you tell me, how do you feel you've implemented this at like Poddster?
So there's this one book that literally not changed the way how I think, but really doubled down on my obsession with process operations, called The E-Myth, Michael Gerber. Old book, like from the 80s, I think. and it explains how you build these systems that work. And no matter how many units you set up based on that prototype that you initially built, they're going to keep delivering the same value. And based on these principles, a lot of businesses around the world are working, from hotels who are all SOP driven, and the best of them, like Ritz-Carlton, continuously keep impressing you with their customer experience. They're not impressing you because of the quality of their stuff. It's about quality of their stuff that are operating on the SOPs. And then McDonald's and Starbucks, etc. All of these big chains that are amazing you with the fact that no matter where you walk into their store, you get the same experience.
Yeah.
And while I was working on Poddster, I was actually spending time in McDonald's. I never said that, I think, before on a podcast. I was actually sitting in McDonald's and writing the business plan for Poddster. I was so obsessed with the processes and SOPs that I was like looking for the inspiration, and McDonald's was always a great inspiration. Look, it's been a few years now, and with few years of my previous experience, I'm not in a position to give advice or to say what works, what doesn't work.
Sure.
We are doing our own things. Some things work, some things don't work that much. I can just share what worked from our experience and a few learnings. One learning is you can't just design SOPs and implement them and expect people to just blindly follow them. So every time we tried to come up with an SOP for a studio and just implemented it, we saw kind of not even a pushback from staff, but like they didn't feel like the need or they didn't really felt them. So they follow and stick to them every time. And the harder you try to push them, the more in a way resistance you feel. But when you involve your staff in creating those SOPs and help them understand why the SOP is important and why the SOP is helping them deliver the service, that absorption of those SOPs is much, much higher. So we initially we didn't start like that, obviously. We soon realized. And then midway through, we started co-creating those SOPs with everyone in Poddster. So most of Podster's staff is actually involved in creating those SOPs. That helps them understand the reasoning why we are doing it, and helps them transfer that knowledge to anyone who is joining now.
Yeah.
Because if you join an organization and everyone is doing something a certain way, you're not even questioning, you just continue doing the same way. But if you join an organization when someone tells you, hey, this is the SOP, and then you see another person in the room not following, you can't expect that the new person will follow.
Yeah.
So this type of business structure really helps you get in control of the business, and what we like to say, have customer satisfaction by design, not by chance.
Yeah. That's I love that framework because, like you said, involving people in the processes. You might have a way you're like, okay, this is what the SOPs need to be, but people who are like, let's say, just in Poddster's example, the editors would be like, no, actually, if we split it up, this workflow would be very helpful to us and would actually help things run a lot smoother. Also helps you find blind spots that maybe you haven't thought about in creating those SOPs. And I love the example that you, and respect that you used to go sit at McDonald's and try to like gauge and like put it all together. And like,
well, it's brilliant the way you think about it. Right? I mean, think about that hamburger that comes. Like, I'm always impressed. Like,
yeah, like just do like an assembly line, 1, 2, 3, 4.
It doesn't matter where in the world you are. Like,
it's always
in most of the cases, it's pretty,
It's
99% is the same. It's just mind blowing.
No, 100%, man, 100%. I just have 2 more questions for you, Vuk. So one of them was, you wrote on a post a couple of months ago on LinkedIn that you weren't sure what you were passionate about, or you didn't know what it was. But then you realize that your passion is actually building, whether it's a house, whether it's a kitchen, whether it's lights. Building is what fulfills you. So I'm curious, because I think a lot of people out there are still looking for their passions or struggling to find it. How did you come to that realization one day? You're like, oh, this is what I'm actually passionate about. And what does the process of building whatever it is fulfill you?
Yeah. I'm not even sure how did I come. I think through a number of lessons and experiences, I realized that none of these things really excited me in essence. And what excited me was the process of creating all of these things. I mean, I came from, software company to podcasts. I mean, there was at the point when I was doing the switch, I wasn't even really sure how I feel about publicly talking now that I'm now all of a sudden in podcasts. Like, I was too conscious actually about, how people will see me now. Look at this guy, from venture building and software development. Now he's talking podcast. Like, what are podcasts? It's funny. I mean, how we are sometimes obsessed with what other people see or think. Whereas
100%.
we should just focus on what we enjoy doing. Whereas now it's becoming like, wow, Poddster. Like everyone is amazed. But I'm not really sure how that came. And I was at some points I was even concerned about not necessarily being passionate about what I do.
Yeah.
Because even now, if you ask me, am I passionate about podcast studios? I don't think it's really the passion comes from podcast studios, or even Podyx now is a software for podcast studios, or even podcasts. Like, am I really passionate deeply about podcasts? I'm not sure if I'm passionate about podcasts. I'm passionate about, I enjoy having that conversation. I think it's really great and helped me a lot in life. And at one point I realized that actually I'm passionate about creating whatever, that doesn't matter what it is. Even a podcast is some sort of a creation and build.
Sure. Yeah.
You start from the idea and then you work on it and then you see a result, and that result, lives and you can see it and feel it. To the point where I told my dad the other day, like, I think that at one point, if we reach that stage, that I don't actually have to necessarily work on anything for living or for money. I think that I would just want to go and build cars or build houses or just fix things like this. I'm just like, every time I even fix the smallest thing, like you need to hang the curtains, I would rather spend 3 hours hanging the curtains and do it poorly than inviting someone to do it for me, because when I see them hanging, I'm like, good job. You did it.
Yeah.
So I don't know, like it came like over the years.
Sure.
And I'm not even sure if you can find your passion. I think it's the process. One really big lesson that I learned from Poddster now is it just tells you that I would never thought about podcasts, and I would never thought this will be my life before the change officer.
Yeah.
But it just kind of happened. I exposed myself to podcasts, got deep into the industry, saw one opportunity and the second and the third, and then it kind of became this whole new thing. And this happened only over the course of 3 years.
Yeah.
So very often people underestimate how much time it takes them to completely shift their life. And if there is one thing that I'm trying to do now is slowly start exposing myself to something else. Because if I start exposing myself to that other thing now, 3 years from now,
you'll be ready for it again.
When the time for that next thing I will be ready. I won't have to sit and think about, okay, what's the next thing?
Yeah. Do you have any ideas in mind?
I don't know. Yeah, I think it's going to be just maybe following some of the hobbies or like passions, as
Sure.
you say. So
Yeah.
water, sailing, motorbikes, something like that. Yeah, that would be a dream. Like if I can connect the two.
Okay. Well. Who would have thought you'd be doing what you're doing now?
That's it, exactly.
So
like
who's to say you won't figure out a way, to connect those two dots too, my man.
Yeah.
I really appreciate that answer, man. I appreciate your honesty and just being like, yeah, this is how it is and this is what I love about it. And, because sometimes I think you look at people who have been successful like yourself and you're like, oh, it was always the plan. It was always known. Like, this was from when I was 5 years old. I knew I was going to be a podcast, studio executive and like running all this shit. But it's like the point you said, conversations, speaking to people. I love doing this is because I live for these conversations. Even if none of this was here, I would walk away from a conversation like this and my day, I'm like, yo, today was a good day. I had a chance to sit with someone, learn, speak. I believe you learn the most from speaking to people. I do my podcast quite selfishly for myself first to follow my curiosity. And whoever is as curious as I am, come along for the ride. You're more than welcome. For my last question, Vuk, this is a question I ask all my guests. Or last two, sorry. If I ask you either personally or professionally the question, what are you most proud of for yourself? What would you say?
Oof, that's a tricky question. Huh? I don't know. Probably it would be along the lines of my persistence and, that I survived for this many years in entrepreneurship and business. Followed that, passion and goal when it was hard and it was easy, but along those years managed to, keep my family around and meet and marry now my beautiful wife and get my son 2 weeks ago. So
congratulations! Why you, bro? Well, yeah, shout out to your dad for coming on podcast 2 weeks after you were born, bro. All right, remember this is documented.
Yeah,
that's all. Congratulations, man! I had no idea. That's awesome, man.
Thanks.
That's awesome.
Yeah, appreciate it. Yeah, it's so yeah, I think I reached this. It was really not easy, but very rarely do I admit to myself, wins or good things. But I think, that's probably what I'm proud of. My family is around, my friends are around. I have my wife, I have my son now, and the business is in a good place. And it took me actually a long time.
Yeah,
it took me a long time, and it was very hard. So.
Yeah.
I think that I should remind myself more often.
And you know what, Vuk? That's why I ask this question, because I, just like you, I struggle with appreciating my wins or everything I've done to get to, where I am. And I think a lot of time people do. So I love that question because it gives people the chance to reflect, and because it did take a lot of work. It did take time. You've been in entrepreneurship for almost 11 plus years. 11 plus years. I've been in it for a year and a half. So and I'm like, man, if it's been like this only after a year and a half, fuck me, we've got a long way to go, but it's all good. And for my last question, Vuk, what is the message you'd like everyone to take home with them today?
Who are we talking to?
To whoever you want.
Well, I think that, like, taking from this experience from the previous 2-3 years, don't underestimate the time it takes to make a switch. Even 1 year, 2 or 3 years is a lot of time. Expose yourself to new things, and better things will come. So it's all about taking chances, but it doesn't necessarily mean you need to risk a lot. So just slowly expose yourself to new experiences, to new relationships. This will introduce you to new opportunities, and then it's about following your instincts and executing on it.
Man, I love what you said there, because one very key point there, you said you can take risks, but you don't have to risk everything. And I think a lot of times when people talk about entrepreneurship and making these jumps, you kind of have to like jump out the window and learn how to fly, and like you have to take that level of risk to make a massive change in your life. But like you said, sometimes the smallest thing, sometimes meeting that one person and being open to learn new things, to meet new people, to expose yourself to new things. You wouldn't have been here without that. I wouldn't have been doing this without that either. So I really appreciate those words, man. And I want to say thank you so much, so much for coming on the show, bro. I've loved this conversation. I knew just from sometimes, as you know, as a podcast host yourself, you meet people out, in the world, and you're like, yo, you feel that vibe and like, this will be a good episode, you don't always get that. So I appreciate you being a fantastic guest. Congratulations on Poddster, Podyx, and most importantly, your family and your your son, man. And best of luck for the future, man.
I appreciate it. Thank you for inviting me. I don't think the success is nearly there, but thank you for saying that. And it was really my pleasure. I hope that we stayed true to what we were preaching, that you were asking efficient questions, and that I was, giving kind of, efficient answers, and that like at least one person stay until the end. Yeah. If you stay until the end, please drop me a message on LinkedIn. I would be so grateful just to hear from you, because, giving us 1 hour and listening to what we're saying actually would mean a lot to me. So,
and to me as well. Vuk, thank you so much, my man.
Thank you, man.
And that's another episode in the bag, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. I really, really appreciate it. All I'm trying to do is give back with this podcast. So if you walked away from this episode having learned something new, gained a new perspective, or you simply just enjoyed the episode, that means I've done my job. If you could please do me the small favor of hitting that subscribe button, it would really mean the world to me and would help me build the show and build the channel. And that's all I ask. Stay tuned for a lot more conversations, new topics, more exciting guests. But until then, and until next time, guys, hope it helps. Peace.